Hi warriors, welcome back to the channel of learning philosophy. You've been lied to. They told you inner beauty matters, yet the world rewards power, not purity. Today you will learn the brutal truth. Your image, your presence, your dominance determine more than your intentions ever will. And in the next 20 minutes, I'll expose the 6 Machiavellian laws that turn inner beauty into a strategic weapon, while the weak continue to worship it like a religion. People who cling to inner beauty often use it as a shield to hide their lack of influence, their social weakness, or their inability to command respect. Machiavelli saw through this illusion centuries ago. The world is governed by perception, not purity. In this video you will learn 6 ruthless keynotes that show you how to weaponize appearance, perception, and psychological presence so you stop being overlooked and start being obeyed. Stay until the end, because each keynote escalates the stakes, and only the final one reveals why the weak are obsessed with inner beauty, while the powerful engineer it as a strategic facade. 1 begins with a truth. Most people never have the courage to confront. The world does not respond to your intentions, your kindness, or the purity of your inner beauty. It responds to the image you project. Every room you walk into becomes a battlefield of perception. Long before a single word leaves your mouth, people are scanning you, sizing you up, placing you into silent hierarchies you are not even aware of. And in those first 3 seconds, long before your inner qualities can be appreciated, the judgment is already made. Machiavelli understood that humans are visual creatures, impulsive, biased, and easily influenced by the most superficial signals. They swear they care about the soul, but they bow to the appearance. They praise inner beauty, yet they reward outer strength. And if you fail to control the image you present, you lose power before you even begin the game. This is where dominance enters the equation. You cannot afford to let the world define you based on its own unstable emotional interpretations. When you leave your image to chance, you become a victim of other people's imagination. They fill the blanks with their insecurities, their fears, their preferences, and their prejudices. But when you control your image deliberately, you seize authority over the narrative. You convert perception into power, you turn presence into influence, and the entire world recalibrates around you. This is why the idea of inner beauty has become a convenient excuse for the weak. It allows them to neglect the one thing that determines how others treat them, what they project externally. Imagine a person who enters a room with unsure steps, scattered energy, soft posture, and a desperate need for approval in their eyes. Now imagine another who walks in with slow, calculated movement, shoulders aligned, expression unreadable, and silence heavy enough to command attention without effort. Both may have inner beauty, but only one is perceived as someone worth listening to, someone worth respecting, someone capable of impact. This is what Machiavelli meant when he said that men judge more by the eye than by the hand. People obey what they see. They follow what they feel threatened or inspired by. They resist what feels familiar and insignificant. To appear weak is to invite exploitation. To appear powerful is to establish psychological territory before a conversation even begins. And the fascinating part is this. Your external dominance does not need to match your internal state. You might feel uncertain. You might be battling inner storms. You might be questioning your own worth. But none of that matters if your presence communicates authority. Power is not about how you feel. It is about what others perceive. A ruler is not respected because he feels confident. He is respected because he looks untouchable. Your job is not to polish your soul until the world finally sees your value. Your job is to craft a presence that forces the world to acknowledge your value before learning anything about you. This requires discipline. It requires awareness of how you move, how you breathe, how you speak, and how you hold your silence. It requires you to treat your appearance as your first weapon, not an afterthought. But once you master this mirror of dominance, something profound happens. People stop testing you. They stop doubting you. They stop ignoring your existence. Instead, they adjust themselves, their tone, and their behavior in response to how you carry yourself. They respect. The image, even if they never understand the inner war you are fighting. Keynote 2 begins with an observation that most people will never admit. Emotional warmth is a liability in the game of influence. The weak cling desperately to kindness and constant availability because it is the only currency they possess. They hope that their approval, their smiles, their willingness to please will make others accept them. But Machiavelli teaches us that value is created through scarcity, not generosity. People chase what they cannot easily obtain. They desire what is slightly out of reach. If you offer yourself too freely, if you reveal your thoughts, your feelings, or your approval too quickly, you devalue yourself in the minds of others. The moment you become predictable in your generosity, the moment your warmth is expected rather than earned, you lose the subtle advantage that presence and scarcity create. Emotional distance is not cruelty, it is strategy, a silent declaration that your attention is worth something, that your time is limited, that you are not here to be conquered by the whims of others. This principle of deliberate distance operates on a psychological lever that most people never consciously notice. Humans are instinctively drawn to what they fear losing. When you create a subtle tension between presence and absence, when you allow only calculated glimpses of your attention, people begin to chase you, to value you, to anticipate your involvement. Machiavelli understood this in the context of rulers, the prince who always bends to every demand, who offers favor indiscriminately, who demonstrates unguarded kindness, is quickly seen as weak and manipulable. The prince who withholds, who appears selective and measured, commands respect even from those who have no allegiance. The weak mistake popularity for influence, the strong know that influence is forged in restraint. Emotional distance is more than silence or selective interaction. It is a method of shaping perception, controlling the narrative, and maintaining psychological dominance without the need for overt confrontation. When people cannot predict your reactions, when they sense that your approval is not automatic, they engage in mental calculations about how to gain your favor. They work harder to impress you, to align with your vision, and to prove their worth. You transform ordinary relationships into strategic arenas where your presence alone dictates behavior. You are no longer a passive participant in social interactions. You are a psychological force that others must reckon with. The application of this tactic requires mastery over your impulses and a deep understanding of human behavior. It is not enough to simply withdraw at random or appear cold without purpose. The key is deliberate control, showing attention only when it magnifies your power, allowing silence to signal authority, and letting absence create desire. Every gesture, every word, every pause must be calculated to maintain this invisible advantage. Machiavelli would argue that those who fail to control these small levers of perception are effectively giving their power away without resistance. When you embrace the cold advantage effect, you shift the balance of social power. You no longer compete on the basis of moral goodness or superficial likability. Instead, you operate from a position of calculated scarcity, commanding influence by virtue of measured distance. The weak will interpret your restraint as arrogance or indifference, but those who recognize strategy will begin to follow your lead. Negotiate on your terms and adjust their behavior to match your presence. Emotional withholding becomes not a denial of humanity, but a deliberate weapon, an instrument of control that shapes outcomes before a word is even spoken and transforms ordinary interactions into arenas of power and influence. Keynote 3 begins with a concept that most people refuse to acknowledge. The inner self is fragile, inconsistent, and unreliable. Your emotions, your moods, your doubts, and even your intentions are shifting sands, easily eroded by stress, conflict, or betrayal. Inner beauty, that illusion of moral purity or emotional sincerity, collapses the moment the world tests it. The powerful, however, do not rely on fragile emotions. They construct an external identity that is unyielding, predictable, and visible to all. Machiavelli recognized that the survival of a ruler does not depend on the ruler's heart, but on the image he projects. The fortress of appearance, as we can call it, is the armor that protects you from chaos, manipulation, and the constant judgments of others. If your inner self is soft, inconsistent, or naive, It can be compensated for, controlled, and hidden behind a kef. Ali maintained external identity. This fortress is not merely about appearances, it is about control. When your external self is stronger than your emotions, you create a space in which others are forced to navigate you on your terms. They cannot manipulate you with provocation because your presence is anchored in consistency, in calculated posture, in a calm aura that signals mastery even in moments of turmoil. While the weak expose themselves to scrutiny, wear their hearts on their sleeves, and crumble under pressure, the strategic individual maintains a persona that is untouchable. This persona is not a lie, it is a tool, a mechanism for stability and influence. Your internal chaos becomes irrelevant because it does not dictate the world's perception of you. People respond to what they see, and if they see a disciplined, controlled, and powerful presence, they bow to it, regardless of the storms raging within. The crafting of this external identity requires conscious effort. Every gesture, every word, every pause, and every expression must reinforce the narrative you intend to project. You are not merely hiding weakness, you are constructing authority. Machiavelli observed that men respect strength more than virtue, consistency more than moral goodness. Your calm under scrutiny, your unwavering posture, your ability to maintain composure when provoked, all of these elements tell the world that you are not to be challenged, manipulated, or dismissed. This is why the weak who obsess over inner beauty fail. They believe virtue alone will protect them, but virtue offers no shield against the calculated moves of those who understand perception and power. The strategic antidote is simple yet difficult. Treat your external persona as a fortress, stronger and more visible than any vulnerability inside you. Embrace the idea that your inner feelings are irrelevant to the way the world interacts with you. Your actions must be consistent, your behavior measured, your presence commanding. A storm within the soul does not matter if the world perceives calm and authority. This separation between internal uncertainty and external dominance transforms you from a reactive individual into a proactive strategist. You are no longer a victim of circumstance or emotion, you are the architect of perception, controlling how people respond to your every move, mastering the fort. Rest of appearance also creates leverage in relationships, negotiations, and social hierarchies. Those around you constantly test boundaries, probe for weakness, and seek inconsistencies. When you respond with a steady, controlled presence, you remove their ability to predict your reactions, leaving them anxious, cautious, and ultimately compliant. Emotional unpredictability is the currency of the weak. Disciplined, projected identity is the currency of the powerful. By constructing this fortress, you ensure that respect, influence, and authority are commanded before a single word is exchanged, before a single judgment is formed, because your presence alone signals that you are a force to be reckoned with, untouchable, and strategically invulnerable. Keynote 4 begins with a reality most people avoid confronting. Virtue without strategy is weakness, and goodness without purpose is exploitation. The weak parade their inner beauty, their compassion, their empathy, believing that moral righteousness will protect them or earn them influence. But Machiavelli understood centuries ago that the world is indifferent to your goodness. People do not follow the pure, they follow the effective. He strategic individual recognizes that virtue is not a lifestyle, it is a weapon, and like all weapons, it must be deployed with precision. When used indiscriminately, it is meaningless, diluted, and ultimately counterproductive. The truly powerful reserve their morality for moments when it creates leverage, when it amplifies influence, when it produces obedience or admiration. This is the essence of selective virtue, the conscious choice to display goodness only when it serves a calculated purpose. To understand this principle, observe the patterns of human behavior. People are naturally drawn to those who offer rewards or impose consequences with deliberate calculation. The weak offer kindness without expectation, warmth without context, and generosity without strategy. Their virtue becomes a vulnerability, a predictable path for exploitation. In contrast, the strategically minded deploy virtue as a tool for control. A compliment given at the right moment can destabilize egos, create indebtedness, and establish authority. An act of generosity, when timed for maximum effect, can create loyalty, enforce obligation, and demonstrate superiority. Virtue ceases to be a moral obligati and transforms into a calculated instrument of influence, a mechanism for shaping the behaviors and decisions of others in your favor. Machiavelli observed that rulers who mismanage virtue often find themselves surrounded by opportunists and manipulators. When you are constantly kind, constantly morally correct, constantly available, people stop respecting you. They perceive no boundaries, no scarcity, and no leverage. Strategic virtue, on the other hand, forces others to calculate your intentions. They are uncertain of your next move, compelled to consider the consequences of testing or disobeying you. This tension produces obedience. This tension produces control. The moment you transform virtue from a habit into a tactical instrument, you elevate yourself above the masses who cling to inner beauty as if it were armor. Implementing selective virtue requires awareness, discipline, and timing. Every action, every expression, every gesture must be evaluated for its strategic potential. Compliments are not given to make people feel good, they are given to gain advantage. Acts of generosity are not performed for approval, they are executed to produce leverage. Moral displays are not signs of integrity, they are signals of calculated power. By redefining virtue as a tool rather than a principle, you take control of the social battlefield. You stop being manipulated by the expectations of the weak, and you start dictating the terms of interaction. This method also protects you from the trap of inner weakness. People obsessed with inner beauty constantly seek validation, reassurance, and acceptance. Their morality becomes a cage, limiting action and exposing them to exploitation. The strategically virtuous, however, exhibit morality only when it enhances authority. They understand that goodness without purpose is meaningless, that compassion without control is weakness, and that the appearance of virtue can be more powerful than the reality of it. By mastering selective virtue, you transform a trait, often associated with weakness, into one of the most formidable tools in the arsenal of influence, control, and social dominance. Keynote 5 begins with a fundamental truth that few dare to admit: actions themselves hold no intrinsic power. Only the way they are perceived determines their effect. People obsessed with inner beauty believe that being good, kind, or more automatically grants influence or respect. They mistake their intentions for impact. Machiavelli understood that perception, not reality, shapes outcomes. The world judges not by what you are, but by what it believes you to be. Every action you take is instantly interpreted, reinterpreted, and filtered through the biases, fears, and ambitions of those observing you. A single misstep, a single reveal of unguarded emotion can undo years of carefully constructed authority. The weak rely on inner integrity, thinking that honesty and virtue will shield them. The strategic individual understands that mastery lies in controlling the narrative, manipulating interpretation, and shaping perception to serve their aims. Perception is a battlefield, and those who ignore it fight with invisible hands tied. When you perform an action, people do not see the complexity behind it. They see results, implications, and symbolic meaning. A leader who moves slowly is calculated. A leader who hesitates is weak. Silence can be a weapon, patience a demonstration of superiority. Every behavior is subject to interpretation, and interpretation becomes reality in the minds of others. Inner beauty, unbacked by perception management, leaves you defenseless. Strategic perception allows you to transform ordinary behaviors into instruments of influence. You are no longer constrained by the limitations of your inner world. You are free to dictate how others experience, respond, and obey. The law of perception warfare requires absolute vigilance. You must evaluate every gesture, every word, every decision, not by your intent, but by how it will be understood. A compliment can be disarming or condescending, a refusal empowering or petty, a silence commanding or dismissive. You do not act for approval or moral satisfaction. You act to produce a calculated response in the minds of observers. Machiavelli would argue that a ruler who miscalculates the interpretation of a single move can destabilize entire networks of loyalty, trust, and power. To master perception is to wield authority without overt force, to control outcomes without conflict, and to manipulate reality without revealing your hand. The strategic antidote is not deception in the sense of lying, but in the sense of engineering interpretation. You do not need to change who you are internally, you need to construct external signals that shape belief. Silence, timing, controlled expression, and the deliberate framing of your actions create a narrative in which you are dominant, respected, and feared. Ordinary people act impulsively and hope for good results. The Machiavellian acts deliberately, knowing that the meaning others assign to his actions carries far more weight than the actions themselves. This approach also neutralizes the weakness of inner beauty. The morally obsessed believe that their goodness is transparent, that it communicates their value. But morality alone is invisible unless it is projected and perceived strategically. By controlling interpretation, you make ordinary behavior extraordinary, mundane gestures commanding, neutral decisions authoritative. The world responds not to what is real, but to what is perceived, and your mastery lies in ensuring that perception bends to your design. Every action becomes a lever, every reaction a signal, and every observer a participant in the carefully orchestrated theater of your influence. Keynote 6 begins with a truth most people are terrified to admit. The obsession with inner beauty is a trap, a psychological prison designed by weakness itself. Those who constantly seek to be perceived as good, kind, or morally upright are enslaved to the approval of others. They spend their lives measuring their actions against invisible standards, hoping for recognition, validation, or praise, and in doing so, they surrender their power. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The pursuit of being liked is the behavior of the powerless. Power is not granted by admiration, it is seized through strategy, control, and unflinching self-possession. The moment you stop seeking approval, the moment you stop trying to be good in the eyes of the world, you begin to reclaim your sovereignty. Those obsessed with inner beauty operate from a place of emotional dependence. They are vulnerable to manipulation because their behavior is guided by what others might think of them rather than what the situation demands. They apologize unnecessarily, they compromise excessively, and they allow themselves to be influenced by the expectations of the weak or envious. The world does not reward their intentions, it exploits their predictability. The Machiavellian path is to silence that part of yourself that seeks validation, to exile the inner fool that clings to praise as if it was sustenance. Your worth should not be measured by how much you are liked, but by how much you are respected, feared, and strategically indispensable. This requires a radical internal shift. You must train yourself to observe the constant pull of approval seeking and consciously reject it. Every thought that asks, "Will they think I am good?" must be countered with, "Does this action advance my influence, authority, or control?" The weak are shackled to morality because it gives them comfort. The powerful are liberated from morality when it obstructs strategy. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized that rulers survive not by being virtuous, but by being effective. In this context, abandoning the desire to be morally praised does not make you immoral. It makes you strategic, unshakable, and free from the emotional traps that ensnare ordinary people. Exiling the inner fool also changes how others perceive you. When people sense that you act without the need for approval, without craving affirmation, they respond differently. They measure their own behavior against your indifference to praise. They begin to operate under the assumption that you cannot be easily manipulated, flattered, or controlled. Your power is communicated silently through the absence of dependence, the deliberate refusal to seek validation, and the calm, unyielding control over your own decisions. Inner beauty, in this sense, becomes irrelevant, because it is no longer the standard by which others define you. The transformation is both psychological and strategic. You replace the craving for moral approval with the pursuit of authority and auto. Know me. You stop acting for recognition and start acting for results. Every interaction becomes a calculated negotiation in which your presence, decisions, and posture dictate outcomes. The weak fear losing love or admiration. You begin to operate from a place of fearlessness because your value is defined internally, not externally. Machiavelli would assert that this is the mark of true power, when others cannot manipulate you with their praise, when their approval no longer directs your choices. You ascend beyond the limitations imposed by the weak, and you begin to govern not just your actions, but the responses of all who encounter you. You've learned the 6 Machiavellian laws, the mirror of dominance, the cold advantage effect, the fortress of appearance, the power of selective virtue, the law of perception warfare, the exile of the inner fool. Inner beauty is optional. Power is not. Appear strong, act strategic, and use beauty only when it serves your ambition. Final power statement: claim your sovereignty. The world obeys the one who engineers their own image. Cliffhanger. For next video. If you think today's lesson was harsh, wait until you see the next one. The psychological art of making people fear losing you. That video will change how you move through every relationship you have.